know it's Mundo Monday, a special day for me because it is an equinox. Twice a year, in March and in September, during my trip around the sun, I am tilted in such a way that everyone on Earth receives an equal amount of daylight and darkness. This signals the changing of the seasons. In September, in the northern hemisphere where most of you live, it is now autumn or fall. Whenever the seasons change, people all over the world celebrate with their own traditions. Autumn holidays tend to be harvest holidays. Feast of Thanksgiving for a successful growing season. In the United States, people do not celebrate Thanksgiving proper until November, but there are other harvest holidays around the world that occur right around the equinox instead, give or take a few days. For instance, Jewish holidays follow a lunar calendar, one based on the cycle of the moon rather than the Earth's own cycle around the sun. The Hebrew month of Tishrei begins at the new moon closest to the autumnal equinox. That was this past weekend. Tishrei means the beginning because it is the first month of the Hebrew year, which means that this past weekend, Jewish people all around the world celebrated their own special New Year's Day, Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is celebrated with, on one hand, contemplation about how to be a better person, and on the other hand, lots of noise from the shofar, a horn made out of a ram's horn. But the tastiest tradition of Rosh Hashanah is the eating of sweet foods for a sweet new year. Those sweet foods can be dates, jams, fruits, pastries, but most commonly, apples and honey. The girl in our first story has a lot of sweet feelings about the apples she and her mother traditionally prepare for Rosh Hashanah. But what happens when their tradition can't happen the way it usually does? Let's read and find out.
Apple Days, a Rosh Hashanah story. Written by Allison Soffer, illustrated by Bob McMahon. What are you looking forward to this Rosh Hashanah? Katie's teacher asked the class. Hearing the shofar, shouted Max. Chicken soup at Grandma's, exclaimed Abby. Katie raised her hand, beaming. Applesauce, she said. Not just any kind. Every year my mom and I go apple picking, and then we make our own. But Katie had even more to share. Oh, and I will have a new baby cousin later this month. Applesauce and a baby in the new year, her teacher replied. How exciting. Katie loved apples. She loved biting into their crispy skin and discovering the sweet, tart taste inside. But she loved applesauce even more. Every year at the orchard, Katie and her mother would search for the perfect apples. They would walk the rows, picking some of each variety until their bucket was full. At home, Katie would place 10 apples on the kitchen counter, and her mother would start to peel. Katie watched as her mother's steady hands moved quickly in circles, unraveling the skin like thread from a spool. Then Katie's mother would core and slice the apples, and Katie would put them into their biggest pot. Katie would take cinnamon and sugar from the pantry and sprinkle them into the pot. Finally, she would squeeze in some lemon juice and add a little bit of water. Soon the kitchen would fill with the sweet smell of apples and cinnamon. Just thinking about it made Katie's mouth water. Let's make next Wednesday Apple Day, said Katie's mother, and Katie drew a big apple on the calendar. Katie told everyone about Apple Day. Soon her dad knew, her neighbor knew, Carla the hairdresser knew, and Sam the shoe store man knew. The principal knew, Rabbi Portney knew, and her friends Max and Abby knew. On Monday, she told her class, it's getting closer! Katie couldn't wait for each day to pass. On Tuesday, the phone rang and Katie answered. "Hi," said Aunt Leah. "May I speak to your mom, Katie?" "Oh, hi," said Katie. "Guess what? We are going—" "Katie, I am sorry to interrupt, sweetie, but I need your mom now." Katie was puzzled. Aunt Leah always wanted to hear about everything, but Katie went to find her mother. When her mom hung up the phone, she turned to Katie. "Your new baby cousin is coming early, so I'm afraid we can't go apple picking tomorrow." "But Mommy," Katie cried, "you promised!" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know this is disappointing for you, Katie. It is for me too, but I have to help Aunt Leah. It's your job to be a big girl." "We won't have applesauce for Rosh Hashanah," said Katie sadly. The next day, Katie's father walked her to school. "Why so sad?" the crossing guard asked. "Isn't today Apple Day?" "I can't go," Katie mumbled. "Can't go?" asked Max. "Why?" "Because of the baby," Katie said. Well, Max told Abby, who told their teacher, who told the principal, who told the rabbi. And when Abby got her hair cut, she told Carla, and when Max went to buy school shoes, he told Sam. When Katie and her dad arrived home after school, they found a bright red apple on the doorstep. Next to it was a note that said, "Dear Katie, I heard about what happened. Maybe this will help. Love, Rabbi Portnoy." The next day, the crossing guard handed Katie a yellow apple, and the principal placed another in her backpack. Katie's teacher gave her an apple at circle time, and so did each of her friends. Her backpack was almost full. Walking home with her dad, Katie passed the shoe store. Sam, too, had a surprise. A jar of cinnamon. "Wait, Katie!" shouted Carla from the beauty shop. "I have some sugar and a lemon for you." When they got home, Katie lined up 10 apples on the kitchen counter and tried to remember what her mother did next. She and her father stared at the apples, the cinnamon, the sugar, and the lemon, wondering exactly how to turn them into applesauce. "First, we have to peel them," Katie said. So her father took out the peeler and got to work. "What's next?" her dad asked. "Mommy finds recipes on the computer," Katie suggested, and climbed onto her father's lap as he searched the internet. "Well, next we have to core and chop the apples," her dad said, reading from the screen. "Then Mommy puts them in the big pot," Katie continued. "We have to find it." In went the apples, then the cinnamon and sugar, and finally the lemon juice. Dad turned on the stove. Soon the kitchen filled with the sweet smell of apples and cinnamon. One taste and they knew. "We did it!" Katie exclaimed. The next morning, Katie walked into her classroom proudly carrying a tray of cups filled with applesauce. "Thanks for your help, everybody," she said. A few days later, on Rosh Hashanah, she filled Grandma's crystal bowl with applesauce and placed it in the center of the holiday table. When her mother arrived with Aunt Leah and her new cousin Will, she hugged Katie close. Together they gazed at tiny Will. Then Katie led her mother to the table. "Oh my!" was all her mother could say. Her father laughed. There was one more surprise. Katie reached into her pocket and pulled out a freezer jar filled with applesauce. Not for now, of course, but soon enough Will would taste it and smile. They all would. The end.
The Hebrew calendar is not the only lunar calendar used to determine holidays throughout the world. Many Asian cultures use a lunar calendar as well, and China, Vietnam, and several other East Asian cultures have their own autumn harvest feast day around the equinox. But instead of it occurring on the day of the new moon, their Mid-Autumn Festival happens on the full moon, October 1st this year. This is important because the Mid-Autumn Festival is all about the moon and is often called the Moon Festival instead. The Chinese Moon Festival is a lot like Thanksgiving in the United States, but with two important additions: lanterns that shine like the moon, and most deliciously, mooncakes, Mooncakes are big and round and golden, like the moon, and stuffed full of nuts or seeds or bean paste or fruit or egg or sometimes even meat, but not all at once. Mooncakes are very filling and usually meant to be shared, but we'll get to that. Author-illustrator Grace Lin has written many stories that retell Chinese folklore in new ways. Don't forget where the mountain meets the moon, which happens before this one, and is full of all the kinds of moon stories that you might hear at the Chinese Mid-Autumn Festival. Yes? But Grace Lin has also made up her own original fairy tale about the moon and mooncakes. It's a perfect story for the Mid-Autumn Festival because not only is it about mooncakes, but it also gives a silly, magical explanation for why the moon has phases in the first place. Full moon to new moon.
A Big Mooncake for Little Star by Grace Lin. I love this opening picture. It reminds me of the opening picture of Blueberries for Sal, one of my favorite books when I was a kid. And I've read an interview with Grace Lin. That was what she was thinking of when she drew it too. A Big Mooncake for Little Star. Little Star's mama laid the big mooncake onto the night sky to cool. Now, Little Star, Mama said, your mooncake took us a long time to bake, so let's see if you can make it last a while. Can you remember not to touch this big mooncake until I tell you to? Yes, Mama, Little Star said, nodding. And Little Star remembered as she brushed her teeth, washed her face, snuggled into bed, and fell asleep. But in the middle of the night, Little Star woke up. She forgot everything her mama had said and only remembered the big mooncake. Pet, pet, pet. Little Star's soft feet tiptoed to the big mooncake. Would her mama notice if she took a tiny nibble? Little Star didn't think so. Yum. Was someone coming? Little Star flew back to bed. The next night, Little Star remembered the big mooncake again. That one bite had been so sweet and tasty. Was the cake still there? Yes, it was. There was that big mooncake in almost perfect circle, all alone and delicious in the sky. Would her mama notice if she took another tiny nibble? Little Star didn't think so. Yum! Little Star flew back to bed. And the next night, what do you think Little Star remembered? Big mooncake, of course. Would Mama notice if she took another tiny nibble? Little Star didn't think so. Yum! Do you notice any nibbles? And the night after that, what did Little Star do? Nibble, nibble, yum! Night after night, Little Star took tiny nibble after tiny nibble of the big mooncake. Until one night, Little Star's mama went to look for the big mooncake. Where was it? It was gone! Instead of a glowing round cake, there was just a trail of twinkling crumbs. Little Star, her mama said, shaking her head, even though her mouth was curving. You ate the big mooncake again, didn't you? Little Star looked up, her grin reflecting her mama's smile. Yes, Mama, Little Star said, nodding. Now let's go make another one. Here they are. I just noticed something else. You see Little Star's little baby bunny? That's just like the story of the goddess of the moon who took her rabbit up to the moon. And they say that you could see the rabbit if you look in the moon very closely.
How how are you celebrating autumn? However you do it, I hope you have a sweet one.